two Hollywood producers had a great idea. And so they formed a group that wasn't really a band, but they had a bunch of hit singles. Then they became a band, and they had even more hit singles. And they went on tour. And, oh yeah, they were in a TV series that had a guest star of Frank Zappa on it. This is their story. Hey, 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 it's the Monkees, and we're going to be monkeying around. So let's drop the needle. Now, they say there are really no new ideas in Hollywood. And an aspiring filmmaker, Bob Rafelson, and a producer, Bert Schneider, decided that they wanted to capitalize on Beatlemania, and particularly the zany antics that the Beatles had done in A Hard Day's Night and Help, by creating a fictional band that they could then put on a TV series. They approached John Sebastian of the Lovin' Spoonful because they thought, they might be really good for this. But that idea fell flat. Then in September of 1965, they took an ad out in Daily Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, and here's what that ad said. Madness, auditions, folk and roll musicians, singers for acting roles in a new TV series, running parts for 4 insane boys. Ages 17 to 21. Want spirited Ben Frank types. Have courage to work. Must come down for an interview. Now, by the time they placed the ad, the two producers had already signed Davy Jones to be in the series. Now, Davy had been starring on Broadway. He played the Artful Dodger in Oliver. And in fact, if you go back and look at the Ed Sullivan Show, the night that the Beatles first appeared on Ed Sullivan, Davy Jones did too, reprising his role from Oliver. After the ad ran, and hundreds of auditions, they settled on the cast. So in addition to Davy Jones, they hired Michael Nesmith, Peter Tork, and Mickey Dolenz. Now, all of these guys had some amount of musical talent, but the producers decided not enough. So they went and hired Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart to be the songwriters for the group. The group was to be called the Monkees. And then to add a little bit of insult, the producers decided that since they didn't think the 4 actors were good enough musicians, they were going to use studio musicians on any recordings and just have the actors sing the vocals for the songs. This didn't set too well with the 4 boys. Nonetheless, you had Davy Jones being the lead singer and playing tambourine, Peter Tork playing bass, keyboards, and banjo, Mike Nesmith on guitar, and Mickey Dolenz on drums and vocals. But during the TV show, basically, since the tracks were recorded by studio musicians, the boys would just be faking it and miming the vocals that they had recorded earlier. On December 12, 1966, the very first episode of this new TV show called The Monkees aired. And it was a big hit, not only because the guys were talented and zany, but because of the music that accompanied it, which naturally meant there had to be hit records that would come out. Now, just 1 month after the TV show debuted, their first album, The Monkees, is released. Now, remember, the album is using studio musicians, and the boys are just singing the lyrics. The album contains the big hit, Last Train to Clarksville, theme from the Monkees, both which were written by Boyce and Hart, and featuring not Davy Jones as the lead vocalist, but Mickey Dolenz. And I also like Papa Jean's Blues, which was written and sung by Mike Nesmith. Buoyed by the success of the TV show and the first album, it was decided that the Monkees needed to go on tour to support the album. But this was a problem, because the 4 of them hadn't really played together as a group. So they had to go into intensive rehearsals before they could go out on the road. And when they did go on those early tours, they sounded a little bit different than the record. But audiences still went to see them. And so, a second album was released. More of the Monkees comes out in January of '67, just 3 months after the first album was released. And again, it's a big hit. And again, they're using studio musicians. The band didn't even know that the album was going to happen. In fact, they were on tour when it was released, and they didn't even get promotional copies of the record. They had to buy copies if they wanted it. As a result, all of them are on record saying they hated this record. But despite them not liking it, it quickly soared up to #1. And Mike Nesmith is actually quoted as saying that he believes it is the worst album in the history of the world. Again, Boyce and Hart wrote 2 songs, She and I'm Not Your Stepping Stone, both sang by Mickey Dolenz. Mike Nesmith wrote Mary Mary, which Mickey Dolenz also sings. Peter Tork sang Your Aunt Griselda, but he didn't write it. And 2 other songs were written by Neil Diamond. Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow, sung by Davy Jones, and the other big hit is I'm a Believer, sung by Mickey Dolenz again. Almost as soon as the first season ends of the TV show, their third album is released, Headquarters, and this is a breakthrough album in many ways. The tensions in the band between them and the producer had been growing, and in fact there was a big backlash once the music press figured out that the Monkees weren't playing their own instruments. So finally, spearheaded by Nesmith, they confronted the producer and said, we're going to play our own instruments on this next album, or we're quitting the band. So they got the producer fired, and they got control over the album, which was called Headquarters, the first that they actually played on. Headquarters was released in May of 1967 and immediately shot to the #1 spot. But, unfortunately, it was notched down to #2 the very next week when a little group out of England released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And for 11 consecutive weeks, the Beatles held the #1 spot, and the Monkees with Headquarters held #2. Although the Monkees had total creative control on this album, they actually didn't write all the songs on the album. The lead-off, You Told Me, was written by Nesmith, and he sings it as well. And Band 6 is an instrumental, and it's credited to all 4 Monkees. You Just May Be the One, again written and sung by Nesmith. For Pete's Sake, co-written by Peter Tork and sung by Dolenz. Sunny Girlfriend, written and sung by Nesmith. Zilch and No Time, written by all 4 members. And Randy Scouse Git, written and sung by Dolenz. As I said, the album was a huge success. And then they started shooting the second season of their TV series. But things were a little different in this. First, they had lobbied very hard and won to get the laugh track removed from the TV show. That was a big deal. And secondly, they decided to get rid of their kind of clean-cut image from the first season and dress more like their contemporaries, which meant more like hippies. But on the recording side, in 1967, November, they released their 4th album, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited. The band was kept very busy with the TV show, so they agreed to use studio musicians again on this album. On this record, I like their cover of Harry Nilsson's Cuddly Toy, which is sung by Davy Jones. What Am I Doing Round, sung by Nesmith. Peter Percival Patterson's Pet Pig Porky, written and sung by Tork. And the hit, Pleasant Valley Sunday, also sung by Dolenz. The album was their 4th consecutive album to hit #1. On the TV front, with the changes in the music and their appearance and the tired formula of the scripts, both the band and the network decided that Season 2 would be the last season of the TV series, The Monkees, and the last episode aired in March of 1968. But just the following month, their 5th album is released, The Birds, the Bees, and the Monkees. Now, I think you could say by this point, the band was getting pretty distracted. Again, they brought back studio musicians, and each one of them produced their own songs. I like Nesmith's Tapioca Tundra, and Magnolia Sims, and Valerie. Then there's the big hit, their cover of Jon Stewart's Daydream Believer. Now, if you want to know more about John Stewart, the Lonesome Picker, you should check out an earlier episode that I did on him. A great talent, and Daydream Believer is a great song. Although I do like this album, this was the first Monkees album not to hit #1. Now, since their TV series was over, they decided, hey, let's make a movie. So they got together with Jack Nicholson and wrote a script, and the movie is called Head. And it is a weird trip, and it basically kind of just destroys the whole myth behind the Monkees. Needless to say, it was a flop. And they did record an album, a soundtrack album, also called Head. But like the film, the album really didn't find a public. By this time, tension among the members of the group had reached a fever point, and Peter Tork quits. Now, the other three decide to go ahead and release an album without him. It's called Instant Replay. There was only one single released from the album called Teardrop City, but the single and the album were not hits. Then in 1969, they decided to record their second album without Peter Tork. It's called The Monkees Present. Now, interestingly enough, with their popularity waning, they actually got more control in the studio than they had for quite a while. And they really decided to make this record their own. Most of the songs are written by the three members. Nesmith has a nice song, Listen to the Band. And shortly after the release of this album, he leaves the Monkees to form the First National Band, a country-flavored group that he has not only recorded a number of albums with, but also had a few hits. But the Monkees were still under a recording contract. So the two left Monkees, Jones and Dolenz, go into the studio to record another album, which is just them, and it's called Changes. Meanwhile, their TV series refuses to die and goes into wide syndication, and all of a sudden, the Monkees are now a hit with a new generation. So Jones and Dolenz recruit their songwriting duo of Boyce and Hart to hit the road and tour. Now, Michael Nesmith refused to participate, and Peter Tork says he was never even asked. And then in 1996, the still novel and relevant MTV decides to air the Monkees TV series, and Monkey Mania starts all over again. So Dolenz and Jones and Tork decide to get together and tour, and they record a new album called Pool It. But there were no hits from that record, and the album didn't really sell. But then a little bit later, Mike Nesmith decides to rejoin. So now the four of them are back together, and they release their 11th studio album, which is called Justice. And all the songs are written by the four members. I like Nesmith's Circle Sky and Admiral Mike, Dolenz's Regional Girl, Jones's Oh What a Night, and Tork's I Believe in You. The album was not a big success, but it did spawn a European tour. But shortly after that tour, Nesmith leaves the band again. The three members continued on until one day when Jones and Dolenz decided to fire Tork. The two continued to tour, but then called it quits in 2002. But in 2011, they reconvened for a 45th anniversary tour, but Nesmith did not partake. And then on February 29th of 2011, at the age of 66, Davy Jones dies of a heart attack. After that, Nesmith comes back and joins Dolenz and Tork on a tour, which is successful, so they continue it into 2013 and 2014. But by that time, Nesmith leaves again. Then to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Monkees, they get back together and record an album called Good Times. It's well received and reaches number 14, which is their highest chart position in over 48 years. The song Good Times is a Harry Nilsson song, and he joins Dolenz in singing it. Then there's the great Goffin King song, I Wasn't Born to Follow, sung by Tork, and Nesmith sings his own, I Know What I Know. In 2018, Mike Nesmith announces that they will go on tour. It's called The Monkees Present The Mike and Mickey Show, because Peter Tork is not with them. The tour is pretty well received, but it's cut short because Mike Nesmith falls ill and has to have quadruple bypass surgery. In that same year, they released their 13th and final studio album called Christmas Party. And it's a cover of Christmas songs. And it gets lackluster reviews, and it doesn't really sell. And then on February 21st, 2019, Peter Tork dies of cancer. Mike and Mickey started a Monkees farewell tour, and their last date playing together was November 14th, 2021 at the Greek Theater in LA. Nesmith looked frail and died less than a month later on December 10th, 2021. That left Mickey Dolenz being the last Monkee standing. So in 2022, he decides he'll go on tour to celebrate his bandmates. And the tour is called The Monkees Celebrated by Mickey Dolenz. So that is the amazing story of a band that wasn't really a band, had hits, then became a band, had hits, toured, had a TV show, had a movie, fought like crazy, broke up, regrouped, broke up again, regrouped, broke up again, but kept playing some pretty good music. And as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist so you can listen to the music that the Monkees created. Thanks for watching. Until next time, remember, here we come again, walking down the street. We get the funniest looks from the people we meet. Go ahead, sing the rest, and keep a rockin'. Now, before you start leaving me lots of comments about how you want Michael Nesmith to have his own episode so we can talk about the First National Band and we can talk about elephant parts, well, just be patient, because you never know when that needle's going to drop. If you like this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.